Back. So I have not been live in absolutely forever. So here I am, guys. And that being said, today's topic I really want to talk about. I was on a call with one of my guys in the academy, and it kind of lit me up to do this live because we were talking about the concept of masculinity in today's day and age. And it's interesting to me because we're talking about it, and I asked him, and I said, you know, what does a masculine standard for you look like? Like, what does a masculine man look like for you in today's day and age? What's up, Abdul? Dude, freaking love you, man. So I asked him this question, and he answers, and I'm like, what are the key principles of a young man in today's day and age that they actually need to see that they're probably not seeing nowadays? And he goes, respect and awareness. And so we look at this conversation, right? Respect to ourselves. Is it respectful to ourselves to wake up at 11 a.m., groggy as shit, wishing that we didn't sleep in, hoping that we actually are going to do some things that we said we were going to do, like wake up early, have some dedication and some purpose in our lives, and really be able to treat our bodies with respect, treat our spirituality with respect, and be able to pour into those aspects of our lives. And then we come to this conversation of how we treat others, right? And how do I respect others as a young man in today's day and age? Is it right of me to respect a transgender because they decided that that's the road that they want to go? I would say no. Personally, I'm like, no, that is an attack on masculinity as a whole. We're telling men that they can do that and they can become women, and they're also saying, oh, for a time period, we got so fucking confused that they almost were able to take medals from women. Like, that's a fucking problem. And that comes down to us not being able to respect others either. And then we come to the conversation and it kind of flips a little bit. Because here's the thing. If I can't respect myself, if I can't respect others, then how am I able to respect the role that I play as a man in today's day and age? You don't. And so we look at this and we look at what is the real problem that men are facing nowadays. Well, the real problem is that they have a lack of respect for the way that they treat themselves, because they have no problem being able to go to porn, no problem being able to sedate, no problem being able to just say, hey, I'm going to do it tomorrow, or I'm going to be emotional based, and hey, I just don't feel like showing up today. This has become the standard. Instead of saying what all the men that I used to hang out with in terms of Wake Up Warrior and seeing men for the last 5 years and watching the way that they operate, and one thing that I can tell you, a key distinction of what made a man, was his ability to be able to manage his emotions and be a logical man in his world. So when I said, oh, I don't feel like working out, but yet I have a plan to go gain 10 pounds this month. Well, does that really matter if I don't feel like working out? I'll just do it tomorrow. And this lack of ability to be able to actually control our emotions, we not only disrespect ourselves, we disrespect others, and we disrespect the role that we're supposed to play in society. We were supposed to build shit. We were supposed to show up and be the man. But now we don't even understand what being a man really even looks like. Now we think that the standard of being a man is being able to just be emotional based, and when I don't feel like doing something, or I feel like identifying as a dolphin today, that is going to be okay. And this is what young men are being taught nowadays, and it's absolutely absurd. Absolutely absurd. And so then you look at this conversation of awareness. And when we pair respect with yourselves, others, and also this awareness that is completely missing, is this awareness around how am I actually going to change? How am I going to create my own masculine standards for my world so that when I show up, I actually am going to put my foot down in the sand, not be just torn by the emotions that come in any situation that I'm dealing with. So when a guy comes at me and he's like, hey, losing his mind, I can say, hey, dude, I don't need to deal with that right now. At the same time, when a woman's coming to lose her mind, I don't be that dickhead dude that just thinks I can overpower and just fucking smack it straight. There's a fine line. And so we look at this awareness that we have, and this awareness has kind of been dulled because there's so much fucking information. I'm talking to these young guys and it's like, dude, they literally are so aware of everything that they can't be aware of how they're treating themselves. Because all we're cared about is Ukraine. We're cared about is what's China doing? What's Andrew Tate doing? What's all these influencers doing? That I never take the time to have awareness around how I'm looking at myself. How am I actually being able to increase my standards as a man in my world? How am I being able to actually uphold those standards with myself? See, these are the questions that I start asking guys in Next Gen Academy. And this is what I've seen when talking to young men. The real problem that they're facing is not necessarily whether or not they know what the right thing to do is. It's that they've gotten so numb and dull because of the situations and the stupid bullshit that they deal with at school that they have to submit to this higher power, whatever you want to frickin' call it, to where they're talking to me about grown guys going into a bathroom, into a girl's bathroom. Grown dudes going into girls' bathroom because they're identifying as a girl today. Like, are you freaking kidding me? They're having to go to attendance and they're going to say, hey, you know when we were back in the day, hey, I'm here, Parker White, we're here, yep. Nowadays, we get to actually fill out a form so that they pronounce our gender the right way. I literally heard this yesterday. I was like, are you kidding me? This is where we've gone to? And so I'm so sick and tired of sitting in here watching young men struggle and get attacked on a daily basis and no one's actually being able to stand up for them. You wonder why Andrew Tate, I look at him and why did he get so much popularity? Regardless of whether he was a great dude all in all his entire life, no, everyone screws everything up. We always have fuck ups. There's things in your past that you're ashamed of. There's things in his past that, well, he can be ashamed of too if he wants to be. But at the same time, it's our ability to be able to constantly correct ourselves and constantly become better. Because through the fuck ups and allowing yourself to do so, you can actually stand and create that foundation of the man that you want to be. But if you are only concerned about the opinions and what you need to do to follow in line with all the sheep, then you never make your own decisions. And this is why we have young men feeling like they can't fucking own their lives. They can't actually make their own decisions because they are being actually ridiculed at their schools for being told that, no, there is more than two genders. And if you say there's only two genders, then you get kicked out of school. That is fucking crazy. Like, are you serious right now? And what young men are being able to have a community in which they can actually have a place where they can be a damn man? Where they can learn the fundamental principles of when you don't feel like doing something, guess what? It doesn't matter. You are to show up because you are a man. There was a rite of passage as men to be able to actually show up regardless of their emotions. And nowadays, we teach them that their emotions mean more than their logic. How fucking interesting is that? And yet, the biggest superpower as men that we have is the fact that we're logical. Women are beautiful beings, and I'm not going to discredit anything about women. They have their own superpowers. They're emotional based. We need them. They can create life. We cannot do that. So I'm not going to come on here and just bash women either. But what I'm saying is there's this an attack on masculine men, and let alone the degrading of men that want to be masculine. And this is a problem because now I'm seeing as young men are literally hiding because they don't know if they're going to be accepted in the places that they're going to in school, in the places that they're going to with their friends. And yet the parents, it's like, dude, you guys are screwed too. Like, you guys are seriously screwed. I watch my dad deal with my sisters, and I'm like, oh my gosh, like, you are accepting this stuff? Like, this is allowed to go on? And yet they have to abide because at the end of the day, well, he wants a relationship with his daughters and they'll just cancel him out if he doesn't. So when I look at the real decisions that we're making, and I look at this conversation of masculinity, I look at this conversation of respect, and this lack of awareness that seems to be going on, we are so used to looking the other way instead of looking in the mirror. We are so used to scrolling another reel versus looking at the habits we demonstrated this morning. Like, when you look at the fundamentals of what I'm teaching young men at Next Gen Academy, it's not that complicated. What it is being able to give them a roadmap of, hey, here is how to be able to show up in a chaotic world. So when you're going to school and you're having to deal with the fact that we got to actually write forms that are saying, hey, the teachers need to pronounce their names this way, because they're now identifying as a they, them, or whatever the hell you want to call that they can stand as a man, a young man, and know that he has standards for himself as a man. Not as a woman, not as a transgender, not as this fucking hippy-bippy bullshit that we're seeing everywhere, but so that he can actually stand in his power, his truth, and be able to be confident in that. It's crazy. You see a guy that actually, for instance, I have a guy, he just joined the academy, and I watch him, he gets on the call with me, and I challenge him in a lot of his thought processes and the way that he's thinking about certain situations. And I watch as he likes the fact that I get to challenge him, but he also likes the fact that he can have his opinion. And he can be able to stand firm in his opinion about what he thinks about situations. And that actually empowers him for when he goes out with his friends. When he goes out with girls, how does he treat girls? How does he treat himself? Because if a man has respect for himself, he treats women differently. If a man has respect for himself, he treats and hangs around with friends that have respect for themselves. His circles change. And this is what I'm seeing with guys in the academy too, is once they are really keen on the fact that, hey, here's my standards as a man, here's how I want to show up, and here's the man that I want to become, all of a sudden they have this burning passion in them to show up. Because they actually believe that they can control something in their life. Because every other environment that they're going into, they can't. They're being told they have to operate a certain way. Or what? They get kicked out of school, and then what? They get shit from parents for it? Or maybe they don't, depending on the household. But I'm watching as like, I just am so fathomed at the fact that we have gotten so far off base that we no longer are crediting young men that want to be masculine, young men that want to be grown men, to be able to create families, to be able to provide security and protection, to be able to be certain in their ways. Because here's the thing that I also was talking about earlier with women that I heard on an interview last night that I was listening to, which is there is an ability as a man for you to be able to stand when a woman comes to you and is emotional, for you to be able to stand and say, hey, I get it, it's scary, it's freaking out, but don't worry, we're good. But if we have a bunch of young men that are only cared about their emotions and these quick little dopamine hits here and there, what happens when chaos hits their doorstep? They crumble. What happens when they get in a toxic relationship? They fold. What happens when they are trying to actually create a career for themselves, but yet they have no belief in themselves? This is when you watch young men get lost. This is when you watch young men distract themselves, and this is when you watch young men absolutely self-destruct. And I was one of them. That's why I even talk about any of this stuff. I was that guy. I was so fucking lost 5 years ago. 5 years ago, I'm sitting there, and many have heard this story, but I'm sitting there and I am so feeling so unaccepted and so put into a box of here's how you need to react and here's how you need to act, and you don't get to actually choose how you act. I felt so imprisoned, so fucking imprisoned, that I thought that the only solution was to walk off a ledge. And I remember being there, and it fucking sucked. Because I felt so caged that I just didn't want to feel caged anymore, so ending my life would have been an easier option than trying to fight to have a right to dictate my own life. And so when I look at what these young men are facing, it's actually tragic. Because the pressures that they're dealing with are even more than what I was dealing with when I was in that situation. And so you're having young men that are being asked to be confident, to have standards, and yet at the same time you're telling them that they have no right to dictate what goes on in their worlds. You have no right to tell them what they can and can't create. You wonder why I'm sitting here and I'm talking to young guys and they're like, I don't know if I want to create a family. What are you talking about? You don't want to create a family. You don't want to be a man, and you don't want to go and fulfill a man's role where you can go provide a home and provide security. Like, you don't want those things? Well, dude, I do, but the problem is that I don't want to have to deal with all the carnage of creating that, because I'm going to have to deal with all this bullshit out there, and I don't think I want to deal with that. And that comes back to what I was talking about earlier, which is this always caring about the emotions and what we're feeling at that given moment. And if we are going to have a generation of young men that only act off their emotions, this is why we have the fucking problems that we do. This is why women are finding themselves here in California in the biggest human trafficking fucking rate that is ever been seen. This is why you're also seeing young men have the highest suicide rates that we've ever seen. It's not just a population of people. It's young men that are being attacked and have no actual acknowledgement for trying to stand up for themselves and trying to stand up for the masculine ways of being able to be a respectful, courageous, and confident young man in today's day and age. So, like, when I look at this and I see a lot of these things, like, I see some of you guys are on here and you've been watching for a little bit. Like, I'm like, Gavin, I was like, if you want, bro, I was like, why don't you come join this for a second? I was like, I don't know how to actually do that. So, like, let me see if maybe I can add you here. I'm like, but I want to hear from one of you guys that's actually listening to this. Because, like, this is not just a simple conversation of, like, my opinion or what's really going on. Like, I want to hear from someone else. Oh no. Oh no. Gavin, I invited you, bro. I was like, am I gonna have to bring Tahar on here now? Okay. Oh yeah, that's right. Tahar, you know this conversation, bro. I was like, when it comes to the conversation of masculinity, you and I have talked about this. Oh, okay, Gavin. There's my man. So, dude, I'm talking on this live, and I'm really talking about like this masculinity that's being attacked, the respect that we have for ourselves and others. You and I have had conversations around this, and we've also talked about the awareness that we lack in being able to control our emotions because we've been trained to just feed into them. And so, like, talk to me for a second. Like, what are you seeing or experiencing? You're in college. You're in school and you're around this community or society and the things that I'm talking about. So, like, what has been your experience?
Yeah, definitely. I think like what you were saying with emotions, it's really interesting because we get swayed so heavily by our emotions nowadays, and it's like if you're not happy and you're feeling a certain way, then you stop and start slacking and like focus completely on that, and it takes you away from the cycle of improvement and things like that. And then that lack of momentum then just puts you further into the cycle of depression and sadness. So what I've noticed, like, and sticking to my commitments and being a part of something bigger, like really doing those things kind of helps you with your confidence. And then if you're having a bad day or something and you still stick to those commitments, like that's what I've found is so important, because then it keeps you going. And then eventually after time passes, like you get out of that cycle of like being sad, you know what I mean?
Yeah, dude, I'm curious. Like, if you're not fulfilling on your word and you're not a man that has respect for himself and his word, like, how much more depressed do you become?
Yeah, definitely. And you feel guilty, you feel shame, like you start getting down on yourself, you start thinking other people are down on you because you're not keeping your promises, and then it just repeats the cycle. It's like a feedback loop, you know?
And so this is why it's so important that we actually like are reinforcing this masculine energy in young men. Because if we don't, dude, we're lost. We're screwed.
Yeah.
Like, do you deal with this in class and stuff? Like, do you deal with a lot of this, like the trend? I don't know, LGBTQ, alphabet army, whatever we want to call it nowadays.
Oh, I'm at a UC, so that's
Okay.
like ingrained in the curriculum. The UC schools are like very, very extremely liberal. I've had classes that have like been what's the word I'm looking for? It's or which program? It's Charlie Kirk talks about it a lot. It's like extreme something like race theory, if you've heard of that.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's ingrained in the curriculum. What I've noticed with students a lot is that it's mainly like they're so under so much pressure to perform and like so much academic pressure that they get extremely anxious, and it feeds into that depression and things like that, and then they can't perform their academics. So
Yeah. And what it like, dude, with that, like you bring up a good point too. Like, there's a stress and anxiety that we're starting to experience, and we talk. I've done research on this too. Like the anxious or anxiety and stress that the young men feel nowadays could be classified as an insane asylum back in like the 90s. And so when we look at that and the stuff that we have to deal with the stress and anxiety, then we have the pressures of, hey, there's 19,000 genders. I'm going to be extreme with all of that. Really triggered about that. And then at the same time, we have like this lack of direction as young men too, to be able to say what is the passage of a man in today's day and age. Because back in the day, like you know, like they would go and they would train with other men. They would have the rite of passage to be able to actually earn the right to call themselves a man. And nowadays it's almost like we are getting told to stray farthest away from that pride of actually being a man anymore. There's so many movements for females and so many movements for women. And I'm going to say with a blanket statement, women are amazing. but it doesn't mean that I agree with every single movement and everything that's being talked about, because there's a degrading of the masculine race in the process of doing it.
Mhm.
And so, like, what are you kind of seeing with that?
Yeah, I think there's like a huge identity crisis going on, like you're saying. People just don't know who you are because you don't have a specific like role. Um, and it's influenced by society too. You go on any social media, any platform, there's it's like telling you who you are and what you're supposed to be in a million different directions, and you're like, whoa, I'm not sure what it is. But the main thing that I found in university is there's two big lacks. There's a lack of meaning and a lack of connection. So most people are going to college and they don't know what they're doing, or they're doing it to appease their parents or what they think people is going to sound good, like, oh, I'm going to go be a doctor, and they don't even like any kind of health or medicine or anything like that. It's just that's what they're doing. So they have a lack of meaning, which creates depression, because you're like, why am I even doing this?
Yeah.
And a lack of connection, because you're surrounded by these students, but they're so focused on themselves. There's no community. There's no similar value systems. So that's why with your program, like, that you get both those things.
Yeah, dude. I mean,
solution oriented.
I mean, you've been part of Next Gen Academy for like 2 weeks now. I know you
Mhm.
just got in. You're already seeing like kind of how we have conversations, how we talk, and what it's really centered around, which is this ability not to be a dickhead, but to be able to have standards for yourself and actually like uphold in saying that I'm a man that keeps my word. I'm a man that actually cares and has values, and not as a one-dimensional douchebag that only cares about himself, but as a four-dimensional man that actually cares about creating legacy.
Mhm.
And with that, like, I'm curious. Like, I got one final closing question for
Okay.
you, bro, which is what happens to a society when well, I guess we're on the topic of young men, but what happens to society when we are isolated, alone, depressed, anxious, and at the same time don't even know? If I ask the average guy right now, what does it mean to be a man? They can't even give a same answer.
Mhm.
What ends up happening to us as a community of young men? You've been a part of it a little bit, but like, what happens to us?
Well, as like from a societal standpoint, it's
Yeah.
collapsed. Like if you've heard that quote, I don't know if I'll get it completely right, but it's like um, strong men create like
Oh, I know what
weak
you're talking
times, weak
about.
times create or weak men create hard times, and it's like a cycle.
Like hardships create strong men, and strong men create easy time, something like that. I know
Mhm.
what you're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah, but essentially, like what it is we're heading into a time where like we're very weak, and we don't know what we stand for. We don't have standards. We don't have values. We don't hold ourselves to any kind of level. So in turn, it's like we're heading down a path of, just like you said with the statistics, like more suicide, more anxiety, more of those problems. And it's going to continue to get worse and worse until eventually something happens which forces us to not get worse, and we have to change. You know what I mean? Where something's going to have to come to change. And you want to prevent that from happening before it happens. You don't want to wait until you get the diagnosis and then you're on the deathbed and you're like, oh, now I'm going to start eating healthy and working out, you know? So preventative things like that. But yeah, that's where we're heading. And with your program, it's smart because it's holding people to certain values. It's holding people to specific standards. It creates a community where you have that accountability. So you have that, like when you say you're going to do something, you continue to do it just because you want to give back to the other guys. You want to be that leader. You don't want to fall for them, you know? So it's like relying on your brothers in that aspect.
Yeah, because there's this brotherhood and tribe in which, if not had, like what we said, right? Like if they're isolated, and young men are nowadays, we become self-destructive. What do you do? What do you do, right? So you
Yeah.
become self-destructive, and in that, you just. By the way, I love all your followers that are like, Gavin.
I know,
I'm
I
like,
just saw that.
it's fucking great, bro. But it's true, and everything that we're talking about is exactly why Next Gen Academy matters, and why men being collected and connected like we are right here, like being able to have conversations about this and being able to know that here's the standard that I'm going to create for myself. This is exactly what the academy's for, and really being able to uplift, because what you were saying, the weak men and strong men, right? We create easy times or hard times, and we've been in a state where we had strong men that created easy times, and now we're having the weak men show up because of the easy times, and we're like, oh shit, we're that generation, bro. We're that generation. That's a problem.
Mm-hmm.
Like, so when you look at that alone, what is your responsibility as a young man in today's day and age for you to act, and how are you supposed to?
Yeah, totally. So I think the biggest thing is leading by example,
Mm.
being a leader, you know what I mean? So you have to take care of yourself. You're not going to go out and tell these people, oh, you guys are weak and you need to fix this when you yourself are not doing any of the work. So you have to take care of those aspects, and it's body being balanced business. Those specific things, if you nail those areas, you're going to be strong. You're going to be a leader. You're going to be able to lead from a place of example.
Mm-hmm.
And even then, people are going to just look at you and be like, wow, he's getting results. What is he doing? And it's going to lead a movement. So it's all about creating that shift and leading to helping other people. Because at the end of the day, that's true. You can be the best leader. You can be the greatest person. But if you're not helping other people, and you're not going to create anything out of that either. So.
Dude. Oh, Gavin's just absolutely killing it. Can we get some fires in the chat for Gavin right now? I was like, that was absolutely beautiful. I was like, men led and everyone else follows. Yeah, here's the thing. Like what you were saying with being able to lead in your own world, dude. Like if you're not doing that, and you're not being able to put a purpose around why there's a reason for you to get up early in the morning. We do this in the academy. You bring a purpose to why you're supposed to actually show up, why it does matter to have a body that actually is like fit and healthy, why it does matter to be spiritually connected. Like if you don't actually have that purpose outside of yourself, now we become a selfish society that doesn't give a shit. And now we have a bunch of young men that damn well what the consequence of this is, and we've already talked about it, so we don't have to go back into it. But it just creates a place where we end up being alone, dude. And I don't know about you, but I'm tired of watching young men be alone. Like it's fucking sad, dude. And like on a real note, like it's really actually sad.
Yeah.
Like it's not even a place of like I'm angry and I'm pissed at the government, or I'm pissed at women, or I'm pissed at whoever. No, it's just sad. Like I'm watching young men just have no certainty or confidence in themselves, and it's our responsibility. It's our responsibility, you and I right here, our responsibility to actually lead by example and live our truth so that we can liberate the lost ones that need to see it too. Because I was a lost guy 5 years ago, had no idea, and I needed men to do that for me. I know at some point you've been lost and you've been like, hey bro, I need that community. This is something that we've talked about. And just by having that already, I'm watching shifts in you just in the last 2 weeks, bro. I mean, we don't need to get that on that publicly. We'll talk about that on our calls. But like you just the shifts that I've watched you make even in the last 2 weeks, just from having a community like that, like what's ended on that? What is the difference for a young man who has a community that he can lean on, like what you've been experiencing, versus when you didn't and you're by yourself? How does that affect the way you navigate?
Yeah, I think it's honestly, I think it's inspiring. Just seeing other guys and other people doing the work, seeing them stick to their commitments and seeing them like take action towards the things that they want to do. It really inspires you to get more in your purpose and be like, oh, well, they're doing that. They're accomplishing their goals. Like I want to do it for them. Because at the end of the day, like it always comes back. Like, yes, you have to take care of yourself, but like what you give is what you get.
Yeah.
So you're giving to them, you're putting it out there, and they're returning it with the same energy. So I think that's been the most powerful, because in the past I've been like, oh, I'm going to get up at 5:30 and start working out before class and take a cold shower every day and take my supplements. And then I do it for a day or two, and you're like, you get off of it. You're like, oh, this excuse. So having like that community is what kind of inspires you to keep going and stay consistent with it.
Yeah. Because you're not going to be that guy. You think that the grown-ass men that were in the war charged at bullets coming at them because they just felt like it? It's like, dude, I'm not being the guy that doesn't run beside my brother right now. Are you joking me?
Yeah.
I'm gonna go regardless, because that pride of being a part of that, being a part of that community, being a part of the brotherhood, being able to connect as guys, you and I, to be able to push each other to become the best versions of ourselves. Because at the end of the day, regardless of society and stuff, your family deserves the best version of you. The girl that you end up with deserves the best version of you. And same with me. So we have to lead by example. And we have to be able to be those men that show up and are the men that can be trusted, integrity, and live by a code, which is very, very much so what we talk about in the academy.
Mhm.
So, dude, Gavin, thank you for coming on here and like just being able to entertain this conversation with me. And all your points, dude, you're on point. Every call that we get on it's usually like this.
Yeah.
I'm
Well,
like,
I
I love
appreciate
it.
Yeah, good luck, and I'll talk to you soon then.
Dude, thank you. I was like, I have no idea how to get you off though, just so you know. So just is what it is.
Yeah, I don't even know.
We're gonna end it together, bro. But at the end of the day, at the end of the day, I freaking appreciate you, man. Like I appreciate you as another young man in the fight, another young man that gives a shit, and another young man that sees the purpose of actually living in truth and being the guy that can be trusted. Because there's other young men that deserve that example to be looked at too. So, Gavin, I'm freaking appreciative of you today, and dude, I'll talk to you soon.
Grateful for you as well, man. Good luck.
See you guys.